Hebrews was written to help its readers in a very specific way. Because the people it was written to were thinking about falling away from the faith. And it was written to people who knew the right thing to do, but they were contemplating doing something else, the wrong thing. And this book of Hebrews is going to be very helpful to all of us because it's a book of encouragement, it's a book of warnings, it's a book that can really build us up in our faith. So I'm looking forward to preaching these messages, and I hope you will be here to hear them. First 14 verses, this is how it goes. This is New American Standard. God, after He spoke long ago to the fathers and the prophets, in many portions and in many ways, in these last days, has spoken to us in His Son, whom He appointed heir of all things, through whom also He made the world. And He is the radiance of His glory and the exact representation of His nature, and upholds all things by the word of His power. When He had made the purification of sins, He sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become so much better than the angels, as He has inherited a more excellent name than they. For which of the angels did He ever say, "You are my Son, today I have begotten you"? And again, "I will be a father to him, and he shall be a son to me." And when He again brings the firstborn into the world, He says, "And let all the angels of God worship Him." And of the angels He says, "Who makes His angels winds, and His ministers a flame of fire?" But of the Son He says, "Your throne, O God, is forever and ever, and the righteous scepter is the scepter of His kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated lawlessness. Therefore God, your God, has appointed you with the oil of gladness above your companions. And you, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the works of your hands. They will perish, but you remain, and they all will become old like a garment. And like a mantle, you will roll them up like a garment. They will also be changed. But you are the same, and your years will not come to an end. But to which of the angels has He ever said, "Sit at my right hand, till I make your enemies a footstool for your feet"? Are they not all ministering spirits sent out to render service for the sake of those who will inherit salvation? Jesus, angels, and me. That's what this is about. Jesus, angels, and me. I got to meet people yesterday that I had heard about, talked to, but never met before. I got to meet Charles Beckett and Chad Cronin, and I'd already met Dave Coxon, but got to talk to him for a while as well. They were all here yesterday for Summer's funeral. Dave Coxon was the one who brought the message, so it was a very good day to see former ministers who were here. In fact, I think Judy Weed was telling me that almost all the former ministers that's ever been here were here except for two, Rick and Kevin. So that was pretty cool. Angels, Jesus, you, or me. Did you hear what was being said, speaking about Jesus? One of the things I hope you got out of that, Jesus is better. Jesus is better. In fact, like you saw the signs that the kids were holding as they were doing their picketing, better is found 13 times, perfect 14 times, established 8, and eternal 6. All those words are talking about Jesus. So think about that. Jesus is better. Jesus is more perfect. Jesus is better established. Jesus is eternal. That right just those 4 words give us a picture of who Jesus is and what He is. Right from the start of this book, the author is telling us Jesus is better than anything else. It's in fact someone who is perfect, more perfect than us. That's sure true. Why is he telling us these things? That Jesus is better, He's perfect, more perfect, He's better established, He's eternal. It's so we want Him. I mean, we don't have to settle for someone who is second best. We've got the best. Because Jesus is better. Throughout this book of Hebrews, we find that Jesus is better than the angels. He's better than any man that ever lived. He's better than the high priest who served God. He's better than the covenant that was given to us by God. He is better than any sacrifice that's ever been offered. Jesus is better than anything. That's the message here. And we need to understand that because He's better than anything, we ought to want Him. Why would it be important for us to know that Jesus is better than anything? Well, it's because, you see, if we don't realize how much better Jesus is than anything else, then something is always going to be better in our lives. We're always going to be seeking something better. And that's the problem this world has today. They're seeking something better than what they've got. And the reason they aren't finding it is because they aren't looking to Jesus. Because He is better than anything. If we don't accept that Jesus is better than anything else in our lives, then you and I have doubt about our own faith. And we will waver. And we'll make the wrong choice when we're faced with choices. If Jesus isn't better than anything else for us, we will neglect our salvation. And it won't be that important to us. And you see, when we allow other things to be better than Jesus, those distractions can actually cause us to lose our salvation, lose our faith. If you go out of here with nothing else, I want you to know this morning, I want you to believe there's nothing better than Jesus. This passage of Scripture also tells us Jesus is better than the angels. He's better than the angels. And, you know, I don't know how much you know about angels, but they're pretty cool. In the Old Testament, they did a lot of great things. They spoke for God in the evening. But what happens here is, Hebrews was written mainly to a Jewish audience. Okay? And so the Hebrew writer, we're not really sure who he was. Some people think it was Paul. Other people think it was somebody else. But regardless of who it was, the Hebrew writer was comparing Jesus to angels because that was something that the Jewish people could certainly understand. They knew quite a bit about angels. In fact, you know, in our text, the very last verse tells us what angels are all about. Verse 14 says, "And are they not all ministering spirits sent out to render service for the sake of those who will inherit salvation?" That's pretty much a description of a guardian angel right there. Angels are sent by God to help us at times. Angels are the most powerful and wondrous beings God created. We can't forget they are created beings, but they're the best created beings God created. The Old Testament speaks of of angels that were continually in God's presence. They're up there in heaven with God. It must be pretty special, ministering to things. Just by being with God, that makes them pretty special. And their presence has such a powerful effect on people. We oftentimes hear two words connected with angels and their appearances. And these two words are, I think, the words that angels said more than any other words. Fear not. Okay? They would come into people's lives and tell them, don't be afraid. Fear not. Why compare Jesus to angels? Well, because there are people who, they want to worship angels. And the way people think of angels today is slightly a little bit different than what it was like in Bible times. The majority of the pictures of angels that we see, and ones that I found on the internet, when I looked up some, they have chubby cheeks, they have beautiful wings, they appear to be women, and you know, that's just not the kind we see in the Bible. Not one of them died for you. Jesus is the only one who died for you. The angels were just there to help Jesus get the good news across to you that you need Jesus. Jesus is the only way to salvation. He is unique. You see, he's better. He's the best. There's no one that him. John 14 says he's the way, the truth, and the life. And no one comes to him except by Jesus. No one comes to the Father except through Jesus. He is the door, John chapter 10. Jesus is the Son of God. He's the center and the source of our faith, of everything. Really. A couple of different times in this first chapter of Hebrews, it talks about He being there for creation. See, he was there with God when everything started off, when our world was created. He is far better than the angels. What the Hebrew writer is saying to us is, even though angels are pretty powerful, they can't save you. Only Jesus can do that. The one we worship, because of who He is and what He has done for you and me. When we see Jesus, who He is, don't you think we ought to want to worship Him? When we really realize what He did, the sacrifice that He was willing to make for us, the fact that He took our place on the cross to take care of our sins, I mean, that ought to make us want to get up in the morning to live for Him. That ought to make us want to come to church, even though we've got other places we could be, to worship Him. That ought to make us want to wake up in the morning and find our Bible and read some of it and pray to Him because of all He did for us. Charles Lamb, an English writer, was talking with a group of writer friends. And he asked them what they would do if William Shakespeare would walk into the room. And they all answered, well, we would applaud, because they recognized what a great writer William Shakespeare was. And then Lamb kind of changed his tone a little bit. He asked, well, what would you do if the Queen of England walked into the room? William Shakespeare was dead at the time he asked this question, but the Queen of England wasn't. And they said, we would stand at attention and bow, they said. And then Charles Lamb asked this, what would you do if Jesus Christ walked into the room. These fellow writers, they responded this way: we would fall on our knees before Him and worship. See, Jesus is better. He's the best. What would you do if Jesus came walking in here today? A young artist wanted to copy a masterpiece. Each day he went to the art museum and he sat studying the masterpiece. He would sit there for hours looking at all the little details on the lines. And then he would go home and try to paint what he had seen. He did this for many days, taking maybe just a little section of the masterpiece and trying to get that burned into his brain so he could go home and reproduce that little part. And the next time he'd come back and he'd study another little part. He did that until he had the whole thing copied in his home. What he had was a fine copy of the original painting. It was so fine, in fact, that people wanted to come see it. And they would say, by looking at this copy of the masterpiece, it makes us want to go see the real thing. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Here's where the application of the sermon is. This week, when people see you, they should say to themselves, I want to go see the real thing, because they see you as a copy of the real thing. Will they see Jesus in you this week? I hope they will. Because you are a copy of Him. Unless you believe that Jesus is the best, that He's better than anything, then you probably won't want to show Jesus to anybody. But if you truly believe that Jesus is the best, He's better than anything, then you're going to want to copy Him. You're going to try to imitate Him. You're going to want to be Him to other people. You're going to want other people to see Him in you. And I realize we cannot be Jesus. There's only one. We're going to fail. We're going to fall short. But we can be the best copy of Him that we possibly can be. You see, just like that artist, he sat down and studied the original, so can we. Because we all have a Bible. We all can make the time. We can all make the commitment to know the copy so well, to know the real thing so well, that we can be a good copy. Unless Jesus is better than everything else in your life, there's always the danger of something else going to take Jesus' place. When Jesus isn't the best thing in your life, there's always going to be the danger of falling away from Him. I want to go to heaven. Do you want to go to heaven?
Oh, yes.
There's a place for all the carbon copies of Jesus in heaven. There is, because He's preparing a place for us. And if you want to go to heaven, then it's important to listen to what the real thing had to say and try to do it. Try to be it. If Jesus is not the best thing in your life, then today we're offering an invitation. We're offering you the opportunity to know Him, make a decision to accept Him into your life, make a decision to live for Him, make a decision to be the best copy of Him that you can be. You know, the Apostle Paul said he tried to imitate Jesus. And he preached to other people to be imitators of him, not because he was so great, but because he was imitating someone who was great, Jesus. So maybe the decision for you today, because you already know Jesus, you're already part of this church, is simply just to be a better copy, to be a better imitation of the real thing. That's the decision you want to make public today. We invite you to come and do that as well, as we stand and as we sing.